Hi, and welcome to The Mill, a podcast brought to you by Mill & Co., an advertising collective specializing in strategy, creative ideation, and execution. I'm your host, Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO of Mill & Co. Today, we have a special segment featuring some of our Millers, our team. They are Makeway Agency. With us is Josh Lowery and Greg Cunneyworth. They are the co-founders of Makeway. Josh, Greg, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Likewise. Thanks for having us.
Our special return guests. They've been here before. Today, we want to talk about remote working, remote collaboration, and marriage of strategy and execution. So Mill & Co. really came to life because if you think about the traditional model of advertising agencies, you have one brand that needs an agency. They need a social media company, a PR company, a production company, a web company, an analytics company, an SEO company. They're looking at all these different partners that all have these very expensive, very big offices with industrial coffee makers and keg machines. I've been there. And the cost to the client is reflective of that. So when the idea of Mill & Co. really came to light of the model that I wanted to build, it was to have everything really under one roof, a curated team for clients based on their needs and their budget. And just to truly be a true partner and not charge them for my coffee maker, which I do use daily. So Josh and Greg, I wanted to kind of chat with you about how our partnership has worked, how Makeway has been able to be an amazing part of the Millers team. Specifically thinking about remote collaboration, knowing that we are not in the same office. And even before COVID, we were in this situation. What, in your opinion, makes this type of working relationship a good one?
Yeah, I think certainly the flexibility to be able to be remote and to collaborate in a lot of different ways. And I think being able to have different perspectives, not necessarily mean some people being in different cities, different states, whatever it might be, different climates, actual like weather climates, also sometimes different political climates, if you want to take it that way, I guess. But all around, just having diverse perspectives and backgrounds, I think adds to the creative process and adds to the work that we ultimately do for our clients and really brings the best of it instead of necessarily having to have all that siloed in one place, or even, if it's two larger places or something like that, being able to spread it out a little bit is a big benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, I feel like the pandemic sort of allowed an agency to be remote. I think there was some stigma of being like a remote agency or one that didn't have a physical office, and I think the pandemic sort of made that okay for a lot of agencies to branch out of their either place where they started the company or place where they actually physically had an office, and broke the stigma of having satellite offices. Now it's not it's not really a negative. It wasn't before, but it certainly, I think, had the stigma to a degree. That a satellite office wasn't exactly legit, and now I think it just sort of leveled the playing field. Some of the smaller agencies, and we're a 10-person agency, it feels like the playing field is a little bit more level now when we're going up against the bigger firms, because they also have to have a Zoom conference, and they also have to pitch their work over Zoom, and it's a little bit more, I don't want to say equal at the moment, but like it is certainly, it feels a little bit, to us at least, more equal.
That's such a fascinating point, Greg. When I think about even how we price out projects based on value, not based on, every 15 minutes of a timesheet, we are definitely more affordable than your traditional agency. Yeah. And that's because we don't have the overhead. So it's interesting to see these, big agencies probably still charging the same rates, even though they are not in their offices, and so I think it has been good for the little bit more nimble, more scrappy style agencies and collectives like Mill & Co. and Makeway that we've been able to make more of an impact at a time like this, because our model is just simple, fluid, scalable, and for the most part, largely unimpacted by something like a global pandemic that puts all of us into a lockdown.
Totally agree.
Yeah. What's really interesting about our relationship is that we've found this really nice marriage between strategy and execution. And I'd love if you guys could just kind of share your perspective on how this has worked for you guys, the benefits you've seen between our collaboration and for our clients, the impact it's having on their business. How do we ensure that this is an effective marriage, especially in a virtual relationship, knowing that we are states apart? That's a multi-pronged question. So tackle away.
I mean, from my perspective, being the creative lead in the company, the legwork and the initial research that a designer and the creative hinges on so significantly is done. And we definitely align with how we approach starting a project. But working with Mill & Co, I mean, we know immediately that there's a lot of merit and there's a lot of work put into that initial research, which in my mind 100% makes for a better product. So from that perspective, having that initial baseline of information to go off of is critical to having a successful project.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Greg. I'm thinking back to one of the first couple of projects where we started working with Mill & Co. And I think somebody had kind of said on the call, like, is this enough information to go off of? And we're like, this is way more than we typically get a lot of times. And it's just like, it's so refreshing just because it's, you can do better work. And I think just what I really appreciate is that it feels like, I mean, we all speak the same language and I think about it in the same ways. But we're able to, I think, support each other throughout the entire process, where a lot of times when we need to be in the weeds, solving like really detailed problems or parts of the project, especially if it's a digital work, for websites and things like that, we can be in the weeds on that, knowing that Mill & Co is still looking at the bigger picture and making sure that we are not have just done the strategy up front, but that we're actually applying that strategy and sticking to it and keeping ourselves honest with executing that in the right way. And so it's a really tricky thing to balance, I think, generally, but it makes it a lot easier when we can partner together and know that we're all speaking the same language, walking in sync, and supporting each other with those different roles and responsibilities on the same project.
Absolutely. And the client is savvy. And I think the client can tell whether or not we are strategically invested in their business and their brand, and they can read through it and they want to hold us accountable. And so I think what's been great for our partnership is holding each other accountable to this strategy is everything. All of the creative and the execution and whatever we do hinges on this strategy. And this strategy is then going to push us into hopefully gaining more organic work and organically growing that partnership with the client, because we've built trust through such a deep strategic relationship. And it's been proven over and over again. And you're right, refreshing is the word to use for that.
You just hit on something that I was going to say in addition to this, but like trust is the biggest impact that I think doing research and working with a client in this capacity has on the outcome of a project, because it's not just guesswork at that point. It's not just an opinion of I like this color or I like this layout. There's a strategy behind it, and there's also a reason behind doing it. I think there's a lot of creative agencies that are creative, but if there's no strategic component behind it or justification for doing it, it's hard to sort of sell it in, and it almost seems like you're doing work that is meant to not be around for all that long when you're just sort of guessing at the creative work. When there's a strategy component and strategic aspect to the work, it tends to stick around longer, and you tend to be able to build off of it.
Yeah, and I think there's work that looks great, but is there work that's effective? Is it actually going to, without any strategy or insight to it, it is just throwing something out there and hoping it's gonna work. But hope is not a strategy. So I think it just makes a complete difference in not just before the project, setting it up, but even after the project to know, was this effective? Are we actually meeting our goals? Are we, is there ROI on this?
Yeah, it's tricky too. I had a lot of people in the early days of launching Mill & Co. 3 years ago say to me, you should not just pitch strategy, because if you give them strategy and you give them all the tools and show them how to build it and teach a man to fish, they're going to take that fishing pole and they're going to go fish in someone else's lake. And I have to tell you, in 3 years of business, that has never once happened. Every client that we have brought on for a strategic partnership has turned into months of creative execution based on that strategy. And it's great to see. I think it's good to see that clients are becoming more savvy and they care about the effectiveness of what they're paying for. Why Mill & Co., our 2 phases of partnership are blueprint and building, and they are separate, because you would never build a house without a blueprint. It won't be sound. It won't be sturdy. There's no foundation. It doesn't matter what color the shutters are. If the house is going to collapse into the ground 3 months in,
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah. And I think it just, again, it goes back to that word trust. I think, they can trust you, like going through that blueprint process to then make sure that you can go through the build process and actually execute it. I think it's a great thing to have that relationship, and I think speaks a ton to the quality that Mill & Co. provides, knowing like how many clients you've provided strategy for and then have continued that relationship on.
Absolutely. Well, and partners like Makeway and many others on our roster are what make it come to life. It's one thing to pitch the strategy on a wing and a prayer that maybe I'll be able to make it come to life, but to do that with a partner where it's like, I know I can pitch this because I know I can execute on it, and I believe I can do that, makes it much more of a stronger pitch.
For sure.
Yeah. Any other words, you guys? Marriage of strategy and execution, remote learning, remote working. We're always learning.
I'll add one other element to this. I think just, from a technical standpoint, one of the greatest things about, having a remote team and having the opportunity for a remote team is also the opportunity for remote support as well around the clock, just because I think COVID, this is another one of the things that accelerated, was people's expectations of when I can have something, whether it's the package that's going to arrive a day or 2 days later, or if it's the app that's always going to be available. I mean, that was always there before COVID, but again, it's just sort of increased the pressure for that need. And I think, again, just the only real good way that you can, provide support, I guess not the only way, but one of the ways that you can provide support and also leverage having a diverse team and diverse perspectives is to be able to work in different time zones in different areas and be able to, manage those time zones and schedules in a different capacity versus always having to have a night shift where somebody's waking up at 2 a.m. and coming into a data center to answer calls or things like that.
I'll tell you one thing. I'm not getting up at 2:30 in the morning to start working, so that won't be me. Josh, Greg, thank you both so much. Thank you for your partnership on being a part of our Miller's team. Thank you for everything. Thanks for joining us today. For all of our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. For more about Josh, Greg, Makeway, or Mill & Co., or to hear more of our podcast, you can check us out on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.